When we're playing with beginners, like first-time Dungeons & Dragons players, should we approach the way that we set up our battle maps any differently? Well, today that's what I'm going to think about. Let's jump into it. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin. This is the Storycraft Society, and this week we are going to be talking about setting up our battle maps with the beginner D&D player in mind. Does this change the way that I set things up? Does it change the way that I design things? Recently, I had a group of kids come to me and ask for me to run a game of Dungeons & Dragons for them. They had never played before. So I've already ran one session for them, and specifically I am running, I think, what is like the unanimous best first-time adventure, Lost Mine of Phandelver. But today, we're coming back for session 2 with this group. There's going to be some repeat players, so it will be their second time playing. And then there's going to be a couple of first time players again in this group. They had such a good time that they're going to be bringing back some new players. I love that. Now I have to set up in preparation for this session. So we're going to start with the first thing, which is this big, huge battle map. I think that is not a great idea for new players. There's already choice overload when it comes to new players. They already have so many things to think about, and then giving them a ridiculously massive battle map with enemies all over the place, I think is just confusing, and it probably makes them not be able to focus on where the action is. So shrinking this map down to a more manageable, small cobblestone map, I think is going to do me a lot of good. Now, the encounter that I'm going to be running for this session is going to be the first time that the players arrive in Phandalin. One thing that I like to think about with my beginner adventure design is that beginners don't know any of the political and role-play stuff that makes the game fun for more advanced players. What they know is the tropes that they've seen in movies and TV shows, in video games, and in books. I like to stick to those sorts of things. I like to let the bad guys be a little bit more proactive than I normally would. So actually what I'm going to do is right when the players arrive in Phandalin, I'm going to have them accosting an old dwarven woman, trying to shake her down for protection money. Right as soon as the players walk into town, they will see who the good guys are. They will see who the bad guys are. Maybe they won't see who the good guys are, but they'll see who the bad guys are. And that's going to be the whole premise of that encounter. I'm going to let the bad guys be implicitly bad, and then that will let the players know, this is the enemy. These are the ones we need to take down. So I need a scene for that. The scene that I'm going to choose is these two little farms right in the northern part of the map, and that's going to be the place where the players come walking in, and they're going to have no choice but to walk down the main drag and run right into these red brands. Let's figure out the building placement first. I think that's next. And then once we have building placement, then we'll start to figure out filling all of the opening areas out. Not opening areas, open areas. Fill all the open areas out. It's early in the morning, and I'm not doing talking goods. All right, so taking a look at the map here, there's Red Brand Hideout, there's Phandalin. So we're going to be set up kind of like this. So we're going to need 3 set of buildings over in this area. We're going to need a 1 singular building over here. Then we're going to need farm fields there and farm fields over here. So for our 3 buildings, figure I'm going to go with this farmhouse here. I'll drop that in kind of like this. That way when the players are coming down the road here, it will be easy for them to see the action that's going on. It'll put them kind of right in the thick of it. And then I have my barn. That can go, let's see, over here like that. That's good. And then I've got this like kind of little farmhand's house. And I think that can go over here like that. Perfect. Then I've got another little farmhouse here. And that, of course, can just go right here, right on the road. Perfect. The next thing that we need to do is get our farm fields all out in place. So I'm going to get those all set out here. That should fill that area out. So the next thing is that it is definitely still looking pretty barren. So let's get some trees in here to spice all of the open area up. So while I'm setting up all of my trees, you're probably very rightfully asking, what does any of this have to do with setting up for beginner Dungeons and Dragons players? I mean, setting up buildings, setting up trees, that just seems like a regular old setting the scene. Well, yes and no. Obviously, putting down buildings is kind of the same no matter who you're playing with. But there are things that I would expect from advanced players that I wouldn't expect from newbies. That's just the way that the game goes. They aren't going to think to use the terrain to their advantage. So if you notice, I preach and preach and preach and preach elevation and pinch points. It's really combat, strategic, tactical advantage points in setting up your terrain. I didn't do any of that with this map. I left it fairly wide open. I left plenty of places for maneuverability and escapism in case the players get into a bad situation and then need to get away from the bad guys. They can do that. I like to set up my terrain as puzzles for my more advanced players because it's something that they have to read the terrain. If the bad guys get up on that elevation spot with their crossbows, they're going to be really hard for us to do anything to, or if we can pull them into this pinch point, that would be a great spot. That's not something that beginners are going to think about. So I try to let it breathe a little more for beginners. I try to make it a little bit more straightforward. The entire fight encounter is going to happen right in this little area right here. So it leaves me room for the bad guys to run away, which inevitably they probably will. It leaves plenty of room for the heroes to take advantage of cover behind buildings and trees, but it also isn't overwhelming, and it's not so much map that they have to explore or do anything. Basically, the combat encounter is going to happen right here. They're going to duke it out for a couple of turns, and then the bad guys are going to run away. So with that said, let's jump into the next thing, which is going to be starting to populate this out with some basic scatter terrain. Fencing is going to be obviously the first thing that I go to because farms have fencing, lots of it. So let's go grab some of that. We'll start scattering that around. Then after that, we're going to move on to the most important part of any build, which is the scatter terrain. That's going to populate this whole thing with little nooks and crannies that are fun to look at, and it makes the place look lived in. It will make the entire area feel alive. Let's go. But with everything all put together, I think the scene came out absolutely spectacular. I really love all of the little details and the things that are not going to be overwhelming for beginner players, but are still going to get them excited about the game and visually seeing everything in the exact right way. My basic tips for setting up scenes for beginners is keep it simple. That is such a really good rule with beginners. Don't try to overwhelm them with incredible tactical decisions that your bad guys could then take advantage of because you understand the rules of the game and they don't know what they can do quite yet. Give them the opportunity to enjoy the scenery, but don't force them into pinch points and elevation choices that are just going to end up overwhelming them more than they already are when looking at a character sheet. So thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this content as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, there's a bunch of ways that you can help support the channel. You can comment on this video, you can like this video, those help a huge amount. You can also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. And the number one way that you can help a small YouTube channel out is to share this video with a friend that you think would enjoy it. But that's all I've got for this week, so until next week, I'll be seeing you. Time to show some beginners some Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons!